So good morning, everyone. I'm going to start while Sage Meltzer she's a climate fellow from IBC, is going to start admitting more people in as they join. This meeting's being recorded today. But first of all, my name is Joanne Jodke. I'd like to welcome you all today. I reside in the city of Guelph in the watershed of the Grand. And I would like to remind everyone remind myself that I am situated on a treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people today. Today, we acknowledge the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation of the Anishinaabeg peoples, on whose traditional territory, I am sitting. So thank you very much. I'd like to once again welcome you all today. We have a mix of CAOs, senior staff, Kim Gavin, our general manager, and some Conservation Ontario staff. Joining us today, we have Swiss Re Senior Client Manager, Bridget Carl, Insurance Bureau of Canada Climate Fellow, Sage Meltzer, Michelle Molnar from the Municipal Natural Assets Initiative, Joanna Defoe, who's the National Director of Climate Change with IBC, the Insurance Bureau of Canada, and Craig Stewart, Vice President of Federal Affairs. A few people who I can see. Can you hear me all right? Perfect. Okay, thank you. I'm looking forward to this session to introduce insurance solutions for natural infrastructure or asset protection, restoration, and management. And particularly, our interest is in reducing flood and erosion risks and building climate resilience. So again, I'd like you to keep your mute on until the question and answer session. You can also put questions in the chat throughout this session today. I wanted to provide a little bit of background as well for everyone. First of all, I know that as CAs and CO, we're all running on a little bit of adrenaline because of the last number of weeks and months, including Schedule 6, of course, and managing through COVID. But I know that there are a number of provincial funding, and I guess there's been some provincial ones as well, that CO staff as well as conservation authorities have been taking advantage of as well. We're working to research opportunities and secure the funding and technical tools that CAs need for delivery of our watershed management services, especially longer-term support. Longer-term support, sorry, it's an ongoing activity for you and CO. So one of the things I wanted to acknowledge too is that exploration of research on different financial instruments and partnerships is not entirely new for a number of CAs or CO. And as well, a number of our municipal partners and stakeholders have also been looking at different financial instruments. For CAs and CO, it's been, the focus has been a lot on restoration and watershed stewardship and low impact development initiatives. Another reminder, recently, CO established a general manager's working group to consider economic stimulus opportunities, which included the submission of a letter from Conservation Ontario to the federal government early on in this COVID pandemic. Nature-based solutions, as we know, is one of the key priorities of the federal government. And we haven't heard too many details on the rollout of potential initiatives other than some high-level announcements. And there still are some opportunities to provide input. We have heard about the 2 Million Tree Program, and nature-based solutions have been embedded or integrated in programs like the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program and DMAF, but some would argue maybe not effectively. We also continue to advocate for government, and in addition, there's a greater interest in exploring public-private solutions that include building a strong case for the investment with metrics on the value of investing in protection and restoration of natural assets. And we know that some CAs like Credit Valley and Conservation Halton have or are implementing municipal natural asset initiatives in their watersheds, and we can learn from this. So I've provided a bit of background for you today that's led to this meeting. It includes a recording of the November 20th meeting that was held by our guests today. And I've also provided for our guests, in preparation for their presentation today, some background on conservation authorities. The proposed outcomes for today, I've suggested, are to learn about Innovative Insurance Solutions Initiative and the related opportunities, to introduce potential project ideas and learn about what the collaborators require in order to develop eligible projects and letters of intent, to learn about opportunities to gauge in this initiative as it advances, and develop action items and next steps. I put some thought to some of the benefits, and I'm sure you've thought of some, and we'll hear from you later, but it's an opportunity to build the case for investment in CA watershed, flood and erosion, source water, conservation areas, services and programs, whether they be mandatory or non-mandatory. Hello, if someone could put on mute, I hear a little bit of background noise. I'd appreciate that, thank you. And this is all through evaluation of natural and other assets. The benefits too include opportunity to collaborate with new partners who have knowledge and expertise to help us build our case, and to promote CA watershed management and our relationship with municipalities to various levels of government. And of course, to strengthen our relationship with municipalities. And there's many others. Some questions that I have, and I know you have some as well. And first of all, I want to reinforce that we really want to hear what your initial reactions are to this, your comments and ideas, and what next. But one of the thoughts I had was, is this an opportunity for less resource CAs and municipalities to access resources, given the eligibility requirements of many of the federal programs require matching funds that they don't have? Can insurance solutions be a tool for flood and erosion risk reduction in addition to our comprehensive program in Ontario for flood and erosion hazard management? And if so, how? Would there be unintended consequences, and how do we address them? So with that, I'm going to mute someone and I'm going to give our guests the ability to share their screen and give their presentation.
Okay, thanks, Joanne. I'll lead off from our side. First, thank you very much for arranging this meeting, and we're really looking forward to having this exploratory discussion with you. We've been having similar discussions with municipalities from across the country, and this is an iterative process. We're trying to do something innovative here. It needs to be based on your needs on the ground, and really our objective for today is to get a better sense of what your issues are, what your needs, your context, and then see if we can shape some sort of solution with some of you. What we have done, just by way of process with others, is we've had sort of this introductory exploratory discussion at the outset, and then after a conversation or two, we've modeled use cases based upon what we've heard, which is sort of a hypothetical portrait of how a solution might work in a given community. And what we would strive to do is after today, ideally, is to do something similar here. Come up, make sure that we've heard correctly, and that we're shaping a hypothetical solution to begin with that captures your needs. So at a very high level, that's our objective for today. So just a little bit of background. So impetus for this work actually comes from the federal government's interest, very high interest in nature-based solutions. There are, at least two cabinet ministers who have a very personal interest in this topic, and they've assumed a degree of international leadership, which we'll get into in a minute. And as a result, we have been trying to support them with coming up with innovative projects within a Canadian context. In particular, Minister McKenna, with her infrastructure portfolio, has been looking, as you all know, has been looking for innovative nature-based solutions. The renewal of DMAF is in the works. We are expecting that it will be announced in the next federal budget. And we expect that some of those difficulties with the previous iteration of the program that Joanne mentioned will be addressed this time around, and that nature-based solutions will be explicitly referenced and supported, and that the threshold for funding be lowered in DMAF so that it can accommodate smaller projects, which often are nature-based solutions are typically smaller in price, as you know. So of particular note, Canada is currently has taken the lead within the context of the Global Commission on Adaptation. This is 2020 has been the year of adaptation. It's turned into the year of pandemic, so the adaptation component has been pushed back a bit, but nothing has highlighted resilience as much as the importance of resilience as much as the pandemic. Nevertheless, there has been a process that is somewhat aligned with the United Kingdom's presidency leadership on the international UNFCCC process leading to COP26, which is to be held in the UK. These things are kind of tied where there will be a focus on adaptation as part of the UK's leadership. And in advance of that, there is a global summit for adaptation planned in late January. And within that context, there is a nature-based solutions track, an actual international track focus on nature-based solutions and furthering them globally. And Canada has assumed the co-leadership of that track along with Mexico. And so as a result, Canada has been trying in fairly short order to come up with some innovative examples, which they can then profile to the global community. And by Canada, it's Minister Wilkinson and it's supported by Minister McKenna. And again, that provides the context for what we're trying to do. And it does influence the timeline as well to a degree of what we're trying to do here. We do have some international examples. If you've gone into some of the source materials that were provided by Joanna for the call, you'll see we do have some international examples of what nature-based insurance solutions could look like from Swiss Re in particular. The case example on the Mesoamerican reef, which I think Bridget's going to get into, is an example that we can emulate. It's been achieved. It's been completed. Contract has been signed. So it gives a very good example of what what we could try to aspire to here. But what we believe is that Canada provides within this context and within Canada's leadership and ambition currently, there is a very solid opportunity to scale these sorts of solutions within the Canadian context. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Joanna Dafoe, to just provide a little bit more detail on what we're doing in the short term and what our short-term timelines are.
Thanks, Craig. Can everyone hear me okay? Great, okay. So thanks again for having us here today. As Craig notes, just in terms of the time horizon and next steps, our short-term work plan really is aligned with supporting the nature-based solutions action track leading up to the Global Adaptation Summit, which, as Craig noted, is at the end of January, on January 25th. And the desired outcome in terms of that near-term objective is to showcase and profile at the summit a collaboration that is underway to pilot nature-based insurance solutions with select municipalities and conservation authorities and partners across the country. And for this reason, between now and January, we're structuring work around the goal of identifying partners for participating in the pilot. And to be sure, between now and January, we're certainly not going to resolve all the details or subtle and complex features of an insurance structure. That work will certainly take more time and likely the engagement of more partners. However, The goal is to find potential partners with the goal of formalizing a mutual willingness to very seriously explore and consider the applications of a nature-based insurance solution within a certain area. So far, we've been very encouraged by the interest. We've received over 100 respondents signed up for the webinar that we held last month, which some of you may have attended, which included guest remarks, not only from our Swiss Re executives, but also our ambassador for climate change and the executive director of the Municipal Natural Assets Initiative. And meanwhile, we've also been engaged in direct discussions with over a dozen municipalities and interested partners. As you may have seen in the background notes, the creative solutions identified by my teammates on this call pertain not only to overland flooding, but also coastal applications, as well as approaches that can be broadened to the watershed level. And it's our view that the mission and the expertise of the conservation authorities here today position us for a very productive call. And we're also very well established to have this discussion with my colleague Bridget from Swiss Re, as well as Sage Melser, the IPC Climate Fellow, and Michelle Mullner with Municipal Natural Assets Initiative. So it's on that note, I'll hand it over to you, Bridget, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thanks so much, Joanna. And as Joanna mentioned, we're, Canada has really taken a leadership role here at exploring nature-based insurance solutions, and all the way up to the federal level, saying that Canada is going to lead here and show the world how these solutions can be scaled, because you take climate change and its mitigation so seriously, which is fantastic. And within Canada, I mean, as I've been learning more about conservation authorities, I'm dialing in today from New York, and we don't have conservation authorities down south in the U.S., but I think it's a fantastic initiative, and I think from the partners we've been chatting to in Canada, conservation authorities, there's a natural, they're naturally well poised to lead for Canada in this direction, given the expertise, knowledge, and connections that you guys all have. So thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy day to hear more about this and explore with us what a potential solution could look like. I'll go ahead and share my screen, if that's okay.
It's down at the bottom, the green.
There we go. Can you guys see this okay? So typical of me to have way too many windows open. So my name is Bridget, as Joanna said, and I'm on Swiss Re's Public Sector Solutions team, where we work exclusively with governments around the world at really helping them to identify and understand their risks, put a price tag on that risk, and we, of course, given the nature of our business, we take a portion of that risk off of their books, which is the very nature of our business. And Swiss Re's been around for over 150 years, based out of Zurich. As I mentioned, I'm based in New York, but we also have a few offices in Canada, a large presence in Toronto as well. Maybe actually, one second, I'll just check. Is it up okay in this way?
Yeah.
I just realized I hadn't had it in presenting mode. You can see it okay, Joanne? All right, great.
Yes.
Thanks so much. And so, given the nature of our business, we see the impacts of climate change directly on our books every year. And we've been seeing this for over 40 years and pricing it into our business, because there's been no denying, the numbers don't lie, as they say. And we've been seeing the impacts of climate change quite clearly for the past several decades. And a few years ago, Swiss Re actually made the bold move to change our vision, to say, what, we make the world more resilient, and we're going to put our brand and our capital behind this vision and mission. And this slide just shows a few examples of how we've been prioritizing sustainability and that it's core to our business for the past several decades, whether this was, in the 70s when we started doing sustainability related research, and it was really an innovative thing back then, to more recently when we've signed the Paris agreements and made several commitments to net zero greenhouse gas emissions going forward. And one of that goals, as I mentioned, was really the creation of the team that I'm on, recognizing that governments inherently take a large portion of risks on their balance sheet. Constituents and stakeholders in municipalities that you all are a part of, when a natural disaster occurs or a pandemic or other risks and major events occur, people look towards their government kind of as the insurer of last resort. But as you likely know, governments are not often reserving for this. Where are they pulling funding from when a natural disaster like the major Ontario floods in 2017, or struggling with the COVID-19 crisis? Where is that budget coming from? It can often involve some post-event images, as I show here, like increasing taxes, budget reallocation, pulling money from other line items that in order to restore and respond to the emergency. It can involve, of course, going to the federal government and looking for assistance or philanthropic funding, or of course, raising debt. However, given that we know, and you guys probably know best, given the nature of your business, that these natural disaster events will only continue to occur, and we just don't know when, we can actually prepare better and work with governments to define their risk, put a price tag on that risk, and really strategize to have a preparedness plan. And that's really where we see the value of insurance come in, and really the development of creating that mix of financing strategies, which really starts here with risk mitigation, and then leveraging those investments by insuring for the risks that you can't mitigate against or reserve for. And governments around the world, my team, the public sector team, has been around for over a decade now, and governments have been seeing real advantages to insurance solutions as complements to overall risk strategy, not a sole solution on their own, but really in complementary with risk mitigation and other efforts, that other financial reserve mechanisms that governments have in place. And so some of the benefits of insurance solutions that are unique as compared to the other types of risk mitigation strategies is that they can be more reliable than philanthropic or federal government support. Federal government support may not always be as timely as we would like, and we don't know how much is going to come from the federal government. And an insurance solution can provide a level of budget certainty, taking out some of the volatility and allowing governments to see some stabilization with that, as well as reducing the pressure to pull from other budget line items. I've seen governments, many states across the U.S. right now, really, of course, struggling given the COVID-19 crisis, the impact it's having on cities and states' budgets, and they're needing to figure out, okay, well, do we pull money from climate change related investments or schools or other things that we thought were a priority, and now we're having to put on hold to respond to this crisis. And that's really where insurance can play a role in providing that certainty and speedy delivery, and kind of being there for governments when a crisis hits. And so that's a little bit more of the general approach and value add that insurance solutions bring. But here today, what we're of course all talking about is the idea of insuring nature. And how do we do it? What is the benefit? And how can how can these types of solutions particularly benefit Ontario? And so this group knows very well, I don't think I need to tell anyone here, you guys can educate me on the high value that natural infrastructure like dams, dikes, and erosion control structures are bringing to the municipalities that you work in. But again, where we see insurance coming in is putting a price tag on that benefit, and knowing that it's risk of failure. We giving clarity to policymakers and investors and the public, understanding, okay, what is the value of these natural assets, and ensuring against the failure of them. So the first step to kind of commercializing this asset and trying to understand those that directly benefit from its existence, and then incentivizing investment. So that's one of the real benefits that Insuring Nature can bring here, is encouraging others to invest alongside it, as I think there's a growing realization that public sector budgets alone cannot be looked to be responsible for these things. We need a whole of society approach. Lastly, I'll just say here that investing in mitigation, I think, I'll reiterate that it's an essential first step. But when we look at the overall risk and what we cannot mitigate against, we can't fully insulate ourselves. It's really protecting that investment and leveraging it to go beyond it for more extreme risks, and say, okay, for these 1 in 50 or 1 in 100-year events that we know our mitigation strategy and reserve strategy cannot protect against, let's take out an insurance policy to give us the peace of mind that we have that financial safety net available should things go south. And as Craig and Joanna mentioned, I wanted to provide a bit more color into where we've seen these types of solutions work globally so far. And note that this is really pioneering types of solutions that we haven't, this is kind of a new concept. And again, why we're so excited about the leadership that Canada is bringing to this. And so this example here, where we've seen nature be insured in Mexico's coral reef cover, this came about in 2017 when Mexican stakeholders, the Nature Conservancy and others really had the realization that these coral reefs are providing an enormous amount of benefit to the community. They're providing tourism revenue. They are, of course, an excellent source for biodiversity support, as well as hurricane reduction by reducing the wave attenuation when a major hurricane hits. And so this insurance solution was deployed a few years ago in order to protect against those risks. And what they actually did see earlier this year with Hurricane Delta, when a major storm hit, was a large insurance payout. So that was made directly to this trust fund that came together. It's made up of scientists, hotel owners who benefit, financial experts who who realized that they had a vested interest in protecting the coral reef, and can really then determine how should that claims payment be spent. And so they didn't need to wait around for the federal government or private sector to support them, or philanthropic funding to come in and support the restoration, but they very quickly received an insurance payment and could get to work on the important restoration that was needed. And a different type of solution here that we worked on over in the Netherlands was actually on the construction of this sand dike project, where a lot of they really wanted to create a new coastline, and it involved a massive construction project of moving sand and grass to really protect this World Heritage site in the Netherlands. And what they wanted to do was take out an insurance policy to ensure that this project would happen on time and on budget. And should something occur while they were in the process of constructing it, that again, their budget and project here would be protected, and they would receive a quick insurance payment should something go wrong. So this is also another type of way that we utilize these insurance solutions, and we could see this working across Canada as well for some of the projects that you guys have in mind. And so stepping back and really thinking about how this type of solution could work for the municipalities that you guys are all working with, the first step is really to determine what is the asset you're trying to protect. Is it the tax revenue itself? Is it the dikes and the dams? Is it the property values along a river where you want to protect against major flood risks? And then understanding what helps to keep that asset safe and how can we mitigate against it. And then from there, once we have a clearer understanding of the situation at hand, we want to then really figure out, well, what would endanger this asset? What is the threat that we're afraid will happen, and how do we insure against that? And so we've put together some thoughts here on how this could work. This example of the salt marshes in Toronto, Nova Scotia, which you likely know has some of the highest flooding frequencies in Atlantic Canada. And the salt marshes are a major natural asset that reduce the flooding and can be protected against. And so when we look at this as a potential natural asset to protect against, we would, just as an example here, protecting the public property, infrastructure, and homes that would be impacted should a flood occur along that coastline there. And so this is just a type of an example of something that we could look to develop an insurance project for, ensuring that really first putting a price tag on the salt marsh and understanding what is the value that it brings to the community, why should we be prioritizing this, and how do we mitigate against future flood events. And lastly, I'll just say here that one of the complicated questions that often comes up early on is, well, how much coverage is needed? And for that, I think back to something I mentioned earlier about, the first step is really to mitigate the risk as much as you can. And then thinking about, okay, well, what are the other measures that the other metrics that would come into place should a major flooding event occur. And you may feel comfortable relying on the federal government or philanthropic support to a certain level, and we should take that into account when developing any type of insurance solution. But it's really that peak risk and understanding, where do we not feel comfortable that we don't think the federal government or philanthropic capital will support us here, and we as a municipality want to have the additional protection and peace of mind in place in order to know that should a major event occur, we have this flexible financial support coming in rather quickly after the event. So I'll pause there. I think that was a lot of information and a lot of me talking, but I'd love to turn it over to you, Joanne, to think about, open it up to see what key questions come to mind. And as Craig mentioned, we'd love to really be a partner with you and any of the conservation authorities in thinking through how these types of solutions could work in Ontario. A first step is understanding the risks and needs that you guys have.
Thank you very much, Bridget. Wanted to just add too as well that conservation authorities, we do have hard flood infrastructure, dikes and dams, but part of the reason we're here today too is to identify opportunities to protect and restore those other assets that are floodplains, wetlands, woodlands, other ecosystem services. So and watershed based. So taking a watershed based approach to it. So thank you very much. And we'll open it up to questions. I believe we've got one from Kate Hayes. Oh, we have a couple here. And many of us on the call are aware, asset management plans are required by Ontario municipalities by July 2024. These plans allow for the inclusion of natural assets. Parallel to this, Credit Valley is currently finalizing a tool for life cycle costing of natural assets, and we will share with partner municipalities and other CAs as soon as possible. There may be very interesting initiative to collectively expand the scope of asset management plans to capture natural assets through a partnership with CAs and municipal partners. CAs have a unique opportunity to tackle at the watershed level with partner municipalities. The concept of incentivizing the protection and restoration of these assets is very intriguing. I think we'd all agree. So is there any comment or response to that other than I think we all agree? Anyone else have any comments? I can't see everyone here. I think everyone is.
I think you might have Mike. Did I see your hand up? Yeah, Mike Walters.
Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, Joanne. So this is exciting. We are undertaking projects already with green infrastructure to try to reduce impacts of flooding. We have one proposed in Alcona. There's others proposed across the watershed. We've looked at the development of actually a flood relief program with our member municipalities where we've identified these opportunities, and then we're looking at how best to facilitate them. One of our first earliest attempts was in Uxbridge, and it was opening up a natural channel through the town because the conveyance was causing backwater, which was causing serious flooding. It's a big investment on behalf of our municipal partners. So am I hearing you right in saying that you would actually consider investing in some of these fixes moving forward as a partner?
Sorry, it took me a second to get off mute. But yes, exactly. These are the types of projects that we want to be a partner to, and particularly first and foremost a risk thought partner, and then if there are ways in which it makes sense for insurance to come in and where insurance can really add value to take some of that risk off of the municipality's plate, that's where we see our role as being.
And that's exactly what we're doing, is we're trying to shrink the floodplain by undertaking these improvements, reduce the risk. Alcona, it's around $2 million annually because they have chronic flooding within the town of Bel Air and South Alcona. And that would be the creation of an enhanced wetland to actually store water, help infiltrate, evaporate. That's the intent there. There's other projects though where we're actually looking at opening up natural channels again that have been enclosed. Those enclosures cause that constriction, which causes the backwater. Would that be something you'd consider as well?
Can you say a bit more about that? I'm not sure it was.
So I'll use Uxbridge, and I can direct you to the website afterwards. So there was an enclosure of the water course through the downtown core, and that was to facilitate building some buildings and a road and a number of other things. As a result, you've got a very small pipe, or in this case, opening, and a lot of volume of water, which then hits that, can't get through because of the constriction, and causes a backwater effect, which fills the water up, and then it spills over through the downtown core. So essentially, we were able to model the impact, and there was something like 190 buildings and residences that were being impacted, the whole downtown core, by just opening up that the conveyance issue, by fixing it, creating a natural channel through the downtown core with a bridge, or even a bigger enclosure. You solve the problem, and you take all those people out of the floodplain. And they're actually doing it. It was at a cost of around $18 million because of the land costs, a number of difficulties. They had to buy properties to remove buildings so they could open the channel.
Wow.
So it was extremely expensive. But generally, the natural wetland solutions aren't as costly because the land usually already is floodplain, and essentially you're just creating a natural feature. And we do have funds to contribute towards this ourselves, as do the municipal partners. But if we had another partner that could leverage the money even further, we could just do more and accelerate the program throughout the watershed. So,
yeah.
So we'd be very interested in being a partner. We have projects on the books. We're doing design on one right now with respect to the Alcona. I know Rob Baldwin's on the call. He's got a number of sites he's identified with the development industry, with municipalities. And the unintended consequence of all this is that it frees up land, which potentially that there is the economic benefit that there could be some development on some of the properties. That's not our goal. Our goal obviously is to ensure that flooding is mitigated and people are protected. So,
yeah. So thank you, Mike. And that one is, Mike is from Lake Simcoe Watershed. I'm also thinking, and so we've got some great ideas and projects with some investment already. And going back to my comment about we have other CAs with ideas who partner with their municipalities, but they don't have those resources to help cost share or add to an initiative like this. I'm wondering how we can scale up or work collaboratively as a network to support those kinds of projects. Also, and I think that's on people's minds, but because we have a short period of time today, and I think we have already decided we want to meet again, some of us, what exactly is needed by mid-January for the expression of interest and intent letter? Are there expectations of expertise, time only? What is it that you need from us now?
Yeah, Joanne, so the letter of intent that we've drafted is really an expression of serious, strong interest in order to move forward in this project and explore with us what a type of solution could look like. So committing, if you will, the time and energy to move forward in this, think about, have clarity on the asset in mind that you'd be interested in exploring insurance coverage for, have already begun to think about the total capacity needed for a total limit for an insurance policy and where potential premium might come from. So not exactly to have all the details ironed out whatsoever, but really just an intention to move forward and explore this with us.
Right. So there's an opportunity as individual CAs, but potentially as our network to endorse this opportunity, perhaps, as a collective?
Certainly. Yeah. And I think as that's something we've talked a bit about is where does it make sense for an individual municipality or conservation authority to have their own insurance project, and in certain cases that will make the most sense. But in certain cases, if there's a risk sharing happening already, if you're already potentially working together on risk mitigation projects because you might share in the risk, then a broader partnership could make sense between several of the conservation authorities. We'd look to you guys to think what makes most sense there.
Right. Yeah. This is the early days, but not. We have time. But I'm trying to go through. There are a few questions here. Let's see here. Asset management. Natural. Personally, like to lean towards the latter. I've been asked by somebody to read there. Okay, a biggest risk to our natural assets involved in flood mitigation is wetlands tend to be associated with impacts from people, like for example, filling as opposed to natural events. So is there a potential for insurance product to cover that kind of risk where it's individual private landowners?
Yeah, essentially, I mean, as long as the risk can be defined, I think we, would be able to develop a coverage that makes sense. I'm not exactly sure what the scenario that you have in mind here, but this sounds like it might be more of a liability insurance product, for example.
Craig, you wanted to say something or?
Oh, I was just, there's a couple other questions on,
Yep, go ahead.
using these tools for the protection of drinking water sources,
Yep.
shore protection, and yes, you could for these, and in some cases, a natural feature will provide co-benefits. So wetlands can address both flood attenuation and water purification, as well as avoiding phosphorus loading. I mean, there's all sorts of co-benefits. So, but yes, in terms of using these tools for drinking water, and the shore protection piece, that's our work in Atlantic Canada, the Truro, Nova Scotia example. That is in essence a shore protection example, and so yes, that's another area of great partnership opportunity. I mean, it's these products are fairly flexible. They can be designed based upon your needs and the local situation. So, the Swiss Re team and their partners can be fairly innovative.
Yeah. I have a question about the copy of the draft letter of intent. There isn't one yet, is there? Like, that's something we would develop?
We have a draft that we've been putting together and playing around with, and would look to you guys for your feedback on it, but it hasn't been shared yet, and we can certainly do that as the next step.
Joanne, I'm seeing Chitra's hand up.
Okay, Chitra, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, just to expand on that question that you raised, Joanne, and that's one of the questions that Kim Barrett and I have from Conservation Halton, is to, and it sounds like Craig has answered that question, but just to step outside of the impacts from climate change risks and other natural hazards, would we be able to explore insurance products due to anthropogenic activities? Illegal dumping of fill is one of the biggest problems in our neck of the woods. So we'd not only be interested in natural hazard impacts on the natural assets, but also anthropogenic activities. So that's our question.
Yeah, and I think as I was saying, as long as it's an event that we can really take a look at it and define it and put a probability around that, then it would be something that we'd be able to insure. So in that scenario, it sounds like a liability coverage to me, but we'd be happy to explore that further offline, if that makes sense.
Okay.
That's great. Thanks.
I have a question from Angela Coleman from South Nation near Ottawa.
Thank you. Perfect. Thanks, Joe. I think this is a great initiative. I'm really pleased to have been involved on the call today. I guess specifically, did I hear at the beginning of the call that the feds have some commitment, and are we looking for a type of project that would be near Minister McKenna's riding in Ottawa? Certainly, we do have a few projects there, and look forward to reaching out in the most appropriate way for some of those things, if those are the types of perhaps individual projects that may make sense in a city like the City of Ottawa. And certainly I see that we have other, there's 3 conservation authorities that work in the city, and I know that together we could probably come up with some good ideas there as well. So
in Ottawa, it would be terrific to have a project in the Ottawa area, not only because of Minister McKenna, who obviously is based here, but also because of the flood, just the fact we've had these 2 massive flood events in 2017 and 2019.
Oh, we know. Oh, we know.
Yes, as you know very well. And there is I think an open question to the degree that how upstream activities along the Ottawa River contributed to those flooding events, and the failure to keep snow on the landscape longer in the spring, and what we can do about that, given that it's impossible to build any more gray infrastructure that would have any effect upstream of Ottawa. It was virtually useless. The 7 dams were virtually useless in 2017 and 2019. So we need to be looking at some alternative mechanisms anyway. And so we know all this. So yeah, we'd love to follow up with you directly on a potential Ottawa project.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Oh no, just a comment, I have a comment from Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, Chandra, it is Niagara, Chandra. used to be Toronto. They'd like to explore opportunities along Lake Erie with residents and municipal partners and other CAs. I did provide you some information about the issues and the challenges along the Lake Erie shoreline as an example as well of some of the challenges.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that was something we were, interested to learn more about. I read that presentation about Lake Erie with great interest, and that, deeper understanding that how massive the issue is. But I didn't see a lot in there in terms of what is possible to do in terms of mitigation. And I was curious to get a sense of that, in particular the erosion issues.
There are a lot of studies going on, and I know the CAs specifically in that area would have a lot to add in terms of the studies that are being done, the efforts to develop shoreline management plans that would help kind of inform what needs to be done, and it's considering climate change issues as well. So we can follow up on that for sure.
Okay.
We can follow up on all of this. We're getting lots of chat in the chat box. Rob Baldwin from Lake Simcoe would like to ask a question.
Thanks, Joanne. This might be a little bit more of a stretch, and maybe there may be an example that Bridget may be able to speak to you from the US. I was thinking more of a conglomerate program where you're looking at green infrastructure, both protection, investment, insurance, on a larger, broader urban base that also then is linked to overall bond rating. We're seeing impacts to municipal bond rating associated with impacts due to residual flooding, lack of investment, et cetera. I was wondering if there is a bridge where that whole broader program does maintenance, investment, insurance, but also affects bond rating, which then reduces municipal impact as well. That sort of full cycle. And I wasn't sure if that thought process or you've seen that in the US model, because I think we have a couple large urban municipalities where I think that could benefit, and we also have a couple municipalities in the Greater Golden Horseshoe that are in the midst of potential large class action lawsuits around that front.
Craig, I'm noticing that you're smiling and shaking your head. Do you want to? Did you have a comment? You may know better than I do.
I mean, yeah. So the answer is yes. We're doing that thinking. Those pieces all, focusing on the incentives, and how all these pieces possibly relate, and the disincentives. I guess the liability risk we think is going to be just growing as a driver with regards to action within a Canadian context. We don't have specific examples within the US context, but maybe Sage or Bridget would. But we were just talking this week of commissioning some work to better understand exactly these points. So
we have a couple of municipalities that have entered into or are moving into a stormwater utility as an example to help fund. I'm thinking it's a way to use that stormwater utility as a basis for then an insurance program, which the wheels are churning. I just think there's some mechanisms there.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I think, like Craig said, we're definitely thinking about this, and this sort of like larger strategic approach to the risk quantification and reduction is really interesting to me personally. And yeah, off the top of my head, I can't think of any great use cases for that yet, but it's definitely a conversation that's happening. And for me, I think what's really compelling about the insurance case and working with a group like Swiss Re is, yes, they can sort of quantify the risk mitigation very well, but it also is a price signal to the banks of the world that deal with some of these other financing mechanisms to actually put a price on what the value of that risk is. So even as we kind of focus on this pilot as our, short-term goal, it then becomes a lot easier when this is treated as a much more conventional tool to sort of say, okay, well, how do we bring private sector into this? Are there ways that you can actually quantify risk reduction in a financial way, or you could work that into the bond market and actually reduce the risk on the financial component as well? So it's something that's very exciting and definitely thinking about in the larger framework of these types of projects. So we are trying to keep that very much a part of the conversation as we move forward to making this a more long-term replicable solution, which ultimately, of course, the goal of this is.
Yeah, and I'll just add that the component to it that if you can, if you're going out and looking for investors to come in on a natural asset construction project, the fact that if you'd have an insurance policy on that overall project, you can get better terms and conditions, and it really incentivize investors to come in. So we've seen that be a key benefit as well.
I have a question. I'm trying to understand, it's Noah Gates from Toronto Conservation Authority. I'm trying to understand the financing associated with the tools. His understanding is that funds are paid once and if the asset has been impacted by a natural disaster based on a predetermined threshold. These funds could then be used to restore, enhance the feature. However, most of the discussion so far has been focused on financing existing projects. Where does the funding come from to support those types of projects? So Noah, do you mean ones that aren't existing?
Yeah, sorry, I can jump in. I guess that was a long-winded question. And this is just sort of my own ignorance, I guess, associated with these sorts of tools. But maybe someone could talk a little bit more about the financing, about how this works. So I sort of get the way it works, so that you're insuring an asset, and if there is impacts to that, then that pays out to whoever has been impacted. You can then use those funds to restore the feature that was impacted. But it also appears that there is potentially additional funding or financing available to be proactive in helping to reduce that risk. And I'm wondering how that works, how that happens.
So there's a use case in the package that Joanne circulated that talks about an agricultural land use example, and it's based on conversations we've been having in Alberta about at the front end being able to restore wetlands that don't exist right now, may have existed in the past but have been drained on agricultural land, and restoring those, and how the financing around those might work. But Bridget or Sage, do you want to tackle this question? I can do otherwise, but go ahead.
Sure. So what I was also going to ask Joanna to talk a little bit about the partnerships that we have, the conversations you've been having with other partners who have been interested to invest in the risk mitigation, and the, insurance would really be seen as a complement alongside that, in a way to incentivize further risk mitigation and leverage those investments so it can go much further. But Joanna and team have been holding several conversations with governmental agencies and philanthropies who have a vested interest in taking part in this type of program as well.
Thanks, Bridget. So yeah, I think in terms of, I find it helpful to think about the sequencing for the early term conversations. And so, the first sequence is having an articulated sense of the peril and as much corresponding data as possible. But then quickly following that articulation stage is with input and guidance from the Swiss Re kind of underwriting team, and understanding the contours of the solution, understanding the funding mechanisms that can help to ensure the success of the solution. And so that's where some of the conversations we've been having with groups like Alice Canada, and understanding with the Department of Infrastructure some more innovative applications of their approach to DMAP spending, as well as potential contributions from philanthropies. That's where we then start to turn to additional sources of capital that could be part of the project. And then in one of the use cases, I know there's a lot of content circulated, but in one of the use cases that Craig actually helped to develop, there's a bit of an articulated hypothetical for how conservation of land can be tied into increasing the resilience and therefore reducing the exposed risk over time, and how that would be structured into the product. So Craig, if you want to add anything to that, feel free, but it is certainly something that could be explored and incentivized.
Yeah. So in the use case, the Alberta example, I think it is, that we put together is, I mean, essentially you'd set up a trust fund that would be tied to the insurance contract, tied to the de-risking, and then the insurer could, front end load some of the funding into that trust fund to make that mitigation happen. The risk would be priced as if it is happening, but with milestones, metrics, incentives built into it. And then that trust fund would provide an opportunity for a blended finance solution where others can make contributions, whether it's the province or it's through DMAF or it's through a foundation, that sort of thing. So we're trying to create some sort of structure whereby many can play and participate, but the whole thing would be designed for the right incentives to get natural infrastructure restored back onto the landscape or created on the landscape if it doesn't already exist.
Yeah. So that could be done on potentially a watershed approach too.
Sage's, yes.
Yeah, and
Right.
in fact, I'll say we do, conservation authorities do partner and deliver on behalf of many of these organizations at the federal level that you're talking about, and are reliant on us to deliver and provide the data and the information and the local contacts and relationships to get those projects in the ground. So it's really important that we be part of this, I believe, even at the highest level, as a collective. I wanted to add just a little bit more to that. Kate Hayes mentions it'd be helpful to better understand if there's an interest in site-specific, right? Flood mitigation with a combination of engineered or natural assets, or something where the outcome can be shared more broadly. So asset management plans that capture natural assets, along with the others. Personally, she's saying we'd lean towards the latter. It would be more innovative and a response to more pervasive need. I think that gets to the watershed approach too, perhaps, but there's so many questions here. I'm just checking the time. One reminder to everybody is the chat box is recorded as well. So we'll be able, as a follow-up, to follow up on any of the questions that haven't been answered, I hope. And let me see here if there's some others. How are we doing for time? 3 new.
We do have some more time for questions. I think you booked it until noon, Joanne, but I'm just wondering, given that we have such a geographic diversity of conservation authorities on the line here, does it make sense to discuss a bit further where it makes sense for potential conservation authorities to work together if there's a shared risk or shared interest in benefiting from an insurance solution because you're inherently work near each other, or is it the case that you would see these all as potentially separate endeavors and you would each?
Yeah, it sounds like there's a combination. In the short term, there could be a combination of. In the short term, there could be some more localized collaborations, but I could see a long-term benefits to the collective remaining engaged. Mm-hmm. That's one suggestion.
Okay.
So, any other thoughts on that?
I was going to say,
go ahead, Angela.
I was just going to say, Joanne, where we've had sort of some areas of extensive flooding in 2017 and 2019, there's a lot of engagement that both with the municipalities and the conservation authorities sort of, in our case in Ottawa, at least kind of working as a trifecta, have already occurred because they really do extend, where the flooding is that extensive, it's extended past multiple boundaries. So we've certainly had a lot of discussion there. So I think we're well poised as a group to start having some discussions together.
Yeah. So there are a number of ways this can be done. I see from Mike Walters at Lake Simcoe, we're a watershed, so very few shared projects. However, then we've got Ottawa area CAs who can see an opportunity to share. or collaborate. We've got more rural area CAs who are saying we'd like the benefit of the collaboration on, you know, across the province, see what we can do, or at least to begin by learning from others and see what the opportunities are, because we do all CAs are responsible for erosion and flood, you know, flood management. So what are some scaled up opportunities that can be applied in the future?
So Joanne, you can scale up to Great Lakes level.
Yeah, you could. There's a lot of potential, and we can't answer all the questions today, but I think we have a great foundation to build a strategy for how we could move forward. And I think it's pretty clear there's some ideas in the short term, and that we all want to remain engaged in some way as this moves forward. And
Great.
As I want to reiterate, we really have been trying to reach out at the federal level. I don't have any problem saying that we did get a response from Minister Wilkinson to our federal letter, and he linked us with somebody, and we still have not been able to get an audience with Minister Wilkinson's staff. So not without trying. So I know they're busy. It's a busy time, but thought I'd put that in there too.
Joanne, it's Tim.
Yeah. Yes. Tim.
Sorry, I just joined a few minutes ago, so I may say something out of context. I was in another. But I just caught about the working together. But it seems in something like this to me that we need to put extra care in picking at least a project or several projects that are really careful about, that they're going to show that they're going to show benefits that we believe are there, that we do it in a very thorough way. And it would be better to do a less number very thoroughly than try to, or even one if we do it well. Because to show benefits is not that simple, right? You need to, it's complex, and there's tools that are quite broad and ineffective, and then there's other modeling techniques that can be more effective. So I just would hope we could be really careful of what we pick and how thorough we are.
Yeah, so we can have that conversation too. I mean, our CA is going to be competing with each other. Is that what you're getting at too? Or we have to be strategic about?
I wasn't even thinking about that. I just meant there is a common benefit here if this works, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
wherever a project might be,
yeah,
I think that should be the priority, to show that when it works and where it works.
Yeah.
I know there are cases where people think it works and it doesn't, because we've seen. I don't want to get into it, but I've seen it. So you want to be really careful.
Yeah. And Tim is from Credit Valley.
Okay. Yeah, and I would just to say I would agree with that. Like, let's think about getting it right as a proof of concept. This is a first pilot in Canada. Let's figure out where it makes most sense, and then go from there. Yeah. And I'd love to understand more where you've tried it and it didn't work, so we know to avoid those pitfalls.
Yeah.
This whole project is set up in a way as a testing a hypothesis, if you will. We're trying to come up with, let's say a number of 5 pilots across the country. That will test different scenarios, different contexts, and then amongst those determine, okay, what works, what doesn't work. So it's very much a learning exercise, what we're trying to embark upon. And so we just throw that out there to Tim's remarks.
Yeah. So yeah, Tim has a very good point, and that's what I guess I was trying to articulate as well. Is in the short term, there could be some really key strategic projects that could be implemented that we can learn from, but I'm just reinforcing that as an association and representing our members, I'd like to see some long-term benefits or even immediate benefits to other members who can't take advantage of this right now, but can learn from it and see where it goes.
Mm-hmm.
And Joanne, on that point, I'd also
Yeah.
just add that, there's also a framing element that we can certainly pursue, where if there is one near-term application that we really thoroughly focus on, but then there's this broader community of practice and conversation and exchange. And so I think that on its own is also a really valuable outcome to include in the meantime. So I see both as being very complementary.
Yeah. And that's one of the things we have been discussing is this idea of a community of practice. I've had conversations with a few CA staff who wonder whether it's worth, not that we need another working group, but a small group that starts mobilizing around the idea of some of these newer innovative approaches and financing mechanisms. So thank you for that, Joanna. How are we doing again for time? We still have some time. Yeah.
Hi, Joanne. Can I come a couple of minutes?
Sure, Ben.
Hey, another Lake Simcoe person. Sorry, everybody. Just kind of jumping on the conversation around obviously where the best locations are to undertake some of these works, and that idea of obviously getting the best value for the natural asset restoration. As you know, or some of you know, we've been doing what we call the stormwater optimization study within the Lake Simcoe, where we're trying to identify the best outcome for the least cost. And the outcome, what we've looked at is twofold. One is from a phosphorus reduction point of view, and the other one is from a peak flow or flood reduction. And so just kind of the question is a little bit, obviously, are you interested in these types of studies that try to identify, where you should be undertaking these kind of natural assets, protecting them or restoring them, as well as actually undertaking the projects themselves?
Yes, yeah, I think that sounds like an incredibly helpful input to these conversations. I mean, it sounds like, if you've already done that level of investigation and studying where it makes most sense to invest, and that would, could help pinpoint us in the right direction.
Yeah, we've definitely done it from the low impact development and traditional stormwater or hybrid pond approach. And the next step for us, one would be to integrate more natural assets into this study. So it's already proven from a modeling point of view to show these benefits. So I think it could be a natural extension to sort of show what we've done, and then to add to this natural asset component to it.
Yeah.
So we can circle up on that if you like.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's all kinds of ideas.
I know.
There's
this is a phenomenally prepared and innovative group.
Yeah. So there's another one here, a project being led by Environment Canada, Land to Lake Initiative, that might be a framework to coordinate CAs and municipal partners in Western Lake, Ontario. No lack of ideas for sure, which I'm not surprised at. Angela, sure.
I think just sort of close to, as we wrap, we hear so many things, and I think it's important just to kind of note that each and every conservation authority hosts a suite of programs, right? So we all do, I don't know, most of us do land acquisition for reasons of natural heritage, natural hazard, et cetera. We do mitigation in that we already, we do have some dams, dikes, water control infrastructure, et cetera. We do restoration works for wetlands and other areas for green infrastructure. And we do things like monitoring and early warning systems and such. So I think it's about trying to figure out what head of program and service fits really well with these types of initiatives. So I think those sort of headings, if I call them land acquisition, mitigation and infrastructure, restoration, and monitoring / early warning, I think it's about trying to figure out the best sort of lens to view all of those things we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm noticing Mike's comment here on priority given to where we're alleviating the most risk. I think, is that the point you're getting at, Mike, with this comment? And how do we figure out where it makes most sense to think about a project first?
That was the intent. It might
Yeah.
not be a geographic area. It could be that if you did a project, say in Angela's watershed, that alleviated the risk to thousands of people, that would be a priority, I would think, moving forward versus something that protected a few hundred.
Yeah.
And we deal with that all the time on our individual watersheds, where we're always looking at what is the benefit, return on investment outcome you're going to achieve from a specific project. We look at other benefits than just the risk to people, property, and social disruption. But it's a good starting point, I think, personally.
Mm-hmm.
And I have here from Tatiana at Credit Valley. They have a variety of prioritization and valuation tools for restoring and managing natural assets. Multiple vulnerability studies as well. So some tools out there to help with that are being offered.
Yeah, that would be helpful to share, Tatiana, if you can, for us to take a look at, and happy to think through that with you.
Any other, looking here. Any other questions? This has been really good. It's been excellent. Do you have any questions for our members?
Well, I'm
Yes.
trying to think about, since I think this is a good problem to have, that we have potentially too many projects in mind from all of you guys, which I don't think is what I thought would happen going into the conversation. So I'd love to chat, brainstorm a bit about next steps, what makes most sense. Sage, Michelle, Joanna, Craig, please all jump in. I just going off of what Mike said here, I think that makes a lot of sense. Is a potential next step for Conservation Ontario and all those on this call to kind of put together where you see the priority and kind of outline the specifics of what the asset you have in mind is, what the risk, what the concern is, and kind of lay that all out so we can begin to move forward and talk about concrete solutions. What do folks think?
I'd like to have a follow-up discussion with those who are interested to help develop a strategy and with how we would like to go forward as a collective, and as well as individuals. And then also, I mean, we do have the summary of the meetings, the template, we need the template idea. What was I going to say? I'll have the questions in the chat box, that some of them that still may need to be responded to, that we could also provide to you for follow-up, is like sort of a Q&A follow-up opportunity. But I think the first step is probably to regroup as some CAs with you on that.
Okay.
Does anyone have any other suggestions from our membership? I think the best way to do that. How would Swiss Re measure project success? You're working on that, aren't you?
Well, I don't think it's how Swiss Re measures it. We're trying to please the ambassador and Minister McKenna, I think. No, but we need to uncover where it makes sense for insurance to play a role and where it can add the most value. I think that's where we would see consider a project to be successful if we can recognize that insurance has a real value to play. And I think in some cases it doesn't. If there's extremely high risk where mitigation needs to first be the priority, the risk is too large to insure. You don't want to offset something that is going to happen every other year, right? You wouldn't want to buy an insurance policy for a risk like that, because you'd end up just trading money back and forth. You want to uncover where insurance makes sense, and it's usually for more peak events.
So if I may elaborate, because I asked that question.
Yeah.
So, one kind of success, maybe from your perspective, is that we can actually measure risk. But maybe from other perspective, is it, can we reduce risk? So there's the two different things, right?
Mhm.
Reducing risk and measuring risk. And I would think that you would be interested in both, because many times measuring risk is very difficult, right? Especially from an insurance perspective. Like because if it's something you can reduce the risk, but it's not something you can insure, then you're going to look at it differently, I would think. So I'm suggesting that I'm just trying to get some clarification really from your perspective because of how we might define a project.
I mean, go ahead.
Oh, so as far as next steps go, then what are your what we've talked about getting together to start strategizing, but can we get a sense of your timelines in a little more detail? What you need from us when?
So, so again, first I would say, don't narrow yourselves down necessarily to just one idea. It'd be great to have,
Okay.
3 options or something, so that we've got a bit of a, we've got an array of examples, and I guess we're trying to get these letters of intent signed by mid-January. The event that Joanna talked about is in mid to late January. So that's why we're aiming for mid. It's not the start of January though. And so ideally, if we could, if you could go away and do, have some reflection, but then we could meet again before Christmas. So at some point in the next 9 days, ideally, to have a follow-up call, that would be ideal.
Okay.
So sometime around the 17th or 18th, somewhere in there.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I perhaps, if you've had that, list of top 3, as Craig mentions, if you kind of have that narrowed down, anything you could send in advance, and then we could come prepared to talk about, put forward conceptual solutions to really have something for you guys to respond to and grapple with.
Right. And do you need them framed in the worksheets that you provided? Is that the best way to do it?
If that's useful for you guys, then yeah, sure, feel free to use it. If otherwise, you consider that just a list of questions for us that's helpful for us to have answered in order to put something forward.
Okay.
That doesn't need to be the worksheet per se.
Okay. I have one question. Just I was curious. The Alberta Agricultural Trust, which document was that put in, shared in?
I'm adding it right now in the
Okay.
and I'm also just going to add our email contact information
Sure.
in the meantime, even though there will be the ongoing discussions amongst yourselves.
Okay. So it would be worth at least getting a date, 17th, 18th, with the team at Swiss Re IBC and MNAI scheduled, and then also in the meantime, an opportunity to have a discussion with CAs before that to develop a bit of a strategy. But that doesn't preclude people from starting to draft up ideas now. And then we can take those ideas and move forward with those for a discussion on the 17th or 18th. But it sounds like if we could have something for IBC staff before and Swiss Re before the 17th discussion, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that would be good if possible. Just so we're, we get to something tangible for people to to guide the conversation. But I know that's a short timeline.
Yeah.
But given the way the ideas were flowing today, I don't think
Yeah.
I don't think that should be a problem.
Yeah. Perfect. And are you okay with people following up with you individually in the meantime?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, perfect. That's good too. Any final words from anyone? I really appreciated this opportunity on behalf of everybody. As you can tell, there were a lot of ideas and a lot of interest from the Swiss Re, IBC, and MNIAI partners in the potential for CAs to engage and help assess the feasibility of this. So this is really good.
Thank you, Joanne, for
yeah.
organizing and bringing all this, the expertise together here. I mean, you guys, this is exactly why I think you guys are such a well-poised group to move forward with these types of solutions and lead the way.
Yeah. And I'd like to thank all the CAs for engaging too, because it's been a crazy time for us, and everyone's really bagged. But we're very, very